My name is Caroline Drake. I am 44 years old, a federal agent based out of Miami, and for the last 2 decades I have hunted some of the most dangerous drug lords in the world. 3 nights ago, I was still in the humid darkness of the Colombian jungle, leading the final raid that ended a cartel's reign of terror. Tonight, I stood in a ballroom under crystal chandeliers, listening to my own father tell 300 wedding guests that I was nothing more than a failed college dropout with a small-time security job. In that moment I decided he, and everyone else, was going to learn exactly who I really am. Before we start, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most? Tell me in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you do not miss what happened next. 3 nights ago, I was breathing the heavy, wet air of the Colombian jungle, my boots sinking into the churned mud as we advanced on a compound that had been the heart of the Valdez cartel for over a decade. Helicopters roared overhead, their blades cutting the air like knives. I led my team through the gates, heart steady, mind razor-sharp. We knew the risks. We also knew we were about to end something that had poisoned countless lives. Tonight, I stood in the back of a grand ballroom, my hair pinned up, my dress plain, my posture careful. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen explosions, scattering warm light across gold-trimmed tablecloths and polished cutlery. Laughter floated over the clink of glasses and the soft swell of the string quartet. At the head table, my brother David sat in his tailored navy suit, his new wife glowing in ivory lace. They looked like the kind of couple you see in magazines. Hands intertwined, faces lit with that soft, endless future you believe in when you are young and untouched by the real weight of the world. My father stood near them, his tuxedo straining slightly at the shoulders, his hand wrapped around a champagne flute as though it were a microphone. The guests around him leaned in, hungry for whatever story he would tell next. He has always been that way, able to draw a crowd with his booming voice, his easy laugh, his talent for turning the smallest events into epics. I already knew how this part of the evening would go. I have lived through variations of it my entire life. He would speak of David's promotion to regional manager of some mid-sized logistics company as though he had just been named CEO of the largest corporation in the country. He would talk about his son's steady climb, his solid marriage, his good choices. Then, if I was lucky, he would move past me quickly. If I was not, he would remind everyone that I had taken a different path. His voice laced with the polite condescension of someone who has already decided the other path is inferior. And my boy David, his voice rolled out over the dance floor. He's making 6 figures now. Got himself a corner office, company car. Everything a father could dream of for his kids. Applause. Male. The murmur of approval. David, grinning, raised his glass toward my father like they were 2 kings toasting a shared kingdom. Then my father's eyes found me. He paused for a fraction too long. That pause told me everything. Of course, my daughter Caroline, he began, and already my chest tightened. Well, she tried college, but it didn't work out. She's got some government job now, security work I think. Nothing too important. His tone was light, almost dismissive, as if to make it clear to everyone listening that this was not the daughter whose story was worth dwelling on. A few polite chuckles floated through the air, quickly swallowed by the music and chatter. Inside me, the familiar burn rose, low and steady, the same fire I had felt when I was 12 and overheard him telling neighbors I was the artistic one, while David was the smart one. The same burn from my high school graduation when he bragged about David's football scholarship but barely mentioned my acceptance to Georgetown. The same burn from every family holiday where my years in the military were brushed aside as playing soldier. My federal work reduced to paper pushing in Washington. My phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced down. A text from Director Alvarez. Turn on Channel 7 now. Without a word, I slipped out of the ballroom into the lobby. The air was cooler here, the music muffled by heavy doors. A television hung above the bar, and as I turned toward it, my breath caught. The news anchor's expression was grave, her voice steady over a montage of images. Armed men in handcuffs, rows of confiscated weapons, stacks of bricks wrapped in plastic. In a decisive operation being hailed as the most successful anti-narcotics mission in decades, Federal agents have dismantled the Valdez cartel, seizing over $2 billion in drugs and assets. Leading the operation was Special Agent in Charge Caroline Drake, a 24-year veteran whose innovative strategies have redefined how international drug networks are dismantled. Then my face filled the screen. Not the woman in the black dress standing in a hotel lobby, but the agent. Hair pulled tight, jaw set, eyes locked on the camera with the unflinching confidence that comes from years of walking into danger and walking out again. Sources indicate that Drake is a strong candidate for the top leadership position within the agency when the current administrator retires next year, the anchor continued. I stood there, staring at my own image, and felt a strange split. The woman on the screen was someone people respected, even feared. The woman in the lobby was the one her father had just called not too important. When I walked back into the ballroom, my father's voice carried easily over the hum of conversation. And my daughter, well, she's had a different path. Dropped out of college, never settled down, no grandkids for me. She works for the government now. Security guard or something similar. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not exactly what you dream of for your little girl. I stopped near the back, the words landing heavier with each breath. At the nearest table, a guest was scrolling through their phone, a frown forming as their eyes darted between the screen and me. Something shifted inside me. For years, I had kept my work a secret, telling myself it was for their protection. But maybe it was because I had been waiting, hoping that one day my father would be proud of me simply for who I was. He never would. I set down my glass and stepped forward. The sound of my heels on marble cut through the chatter. One by one, heads turned, conversations faded, forks paused mid-air. I need to correct something, I said. My voice was even, but it carried, slicing through the warm, heavy air of the room. My father's smile faltered. He looked at me with mild annoyance, like a man interrupted in the middle of a story he was enjoying far too much. And that was the moment I knew. Tonight the story was about to change. My father's jaw shifted as if the words were pebbles he had to grind down before swallowing. A few guests laughed in the unsure way people do when they suspect the joke has turned, and they do not want to be the last to notice. The quartet stilled. A waiter froze mid-pour, a pale ribbon of champagne trembling just above a glass. "Caroline," my father said, soft at first, then stronger, the way he used to call me in from the yard when I stayed out past dusk. "Honey, I'm giving a toast." "I know," I said. "That is why I am standing." The microphone at the head table was meant for best man speeches and clumsy congratulatory stories, not for reckoning. Still, I felt the room lean toward me, all those bodies turning as one, sensing a current moving beneath the parquet floor. My fingers did not shake. I was surprised by that. In the jungle, I had felt my heartbeat steady like a drum I could trust. Here it matched that same rhythm, cool and absolute. "I need to correct something," I said again. And I watched the idea settle over the tables like a sheet being drawn up over a face. My father glanced at the groom's table, hunting for an ally. David stared at me with an open, uneasy smile, the look of a man whose new life had already begun and who did not want old truths scuffed across his fresh vows. His bride held his hand under the cloth, her eyes bright with the hope that whatever this was, it would pass quickly, like a summer storm that threatens and then moves on without breaking. I stepped closer. The aisle between tables was a narrow river. Perfume and warmed butter and the faint bite of spilled gin rode the air. I saw faces I knew from childhood, softened and retextured by the years. Mrs. Prentice from 2 doors down, who used to bring us fruit pies and tell me I was too wild for a girl. Mr. Wallace from the church committee, who slapped David on the back every Sunday and told me I would find my way eventually if I learned to be more patient. Aunt Delia with her pearl earrings and her habit of treating me like a quiet storm that might ruin the picnic. I passed them all, and with each step another memory unlatched. There I was at 8, standing in the doorway of my father's office while he held court over neighbors at a backyard barbecue. He lifted David to the picnic table and told everyone to look at his strong arms, his solid throw, the way he would carry the family name down the field and into glory. I watched, a paper crown still crooked on my head from a game my mother had invented to keep me busy. My father saw me then and smiled the thin smile he wore when he was being polite. He told them I drew well, that I had a good imagination. People nodded. Later that night, I heard him tell my mother that he just hoped I would land somewhere safe. Then 17. The gymnasium smelled like varnish and roses from a florist who had overcorrected for the bleach. My name was called with a scholarship that had taken me months of extra work and essays to secure. My father clapped, but he did not rise. He saved his standing ovation for David's acceptance to a state school on a football ride. Afterward, in the parking lot, he put an arm around me and said I was still his girl, even if I liked books more than people. I laughed like it was a compliment. 20. The bus that took me to basic training was colder than I expected. I wore my courage like a coat I had sewn myself. My father called me a week in and asked when I would quit and come home. I told him it was not a phase. He sighed and told me to be careful, then put my mother on the phone to fill the silence with weather and recipes. When I submitted my transfer to federal service, he told people I had a government job, the kind you get when you are not sure what else to do. The aisle ended. The head table rose before me like a stage with the wrong play on it. Someone had arranged white lilies in tall vases, their scent thick and green, a garden dragged indoors against its will. I reached the small stretch of parquet that served as a dance floor and realized the quartet had gone quiet. The last note hung like spider silk and then broke. "Caroline," my father began again. He tried to chuckle. "Do not make a scene." That sentence sat on my tongue like a dare. Do not make a scene. I had spent years honoring those words, shrinking when I wanted to speak, lowering my light because someone else's eyes were delicate. I had made myself smaller so that the men in my world could keep their stories tidy. "I am not making a scene," I said. "I am telling the truth." A woman near the cake table tilted her phone. Her brow knotted. She turned the screen toward the man beside her, whispered, looked back at me, then at my father. The ripple began there. Greens lifted. Faces flickered between the blue glow of the news and the warm gold of the chandeliers. A murmur rolled across the room, less like gossip and more like weather. I did not look away from my father. I could have told him so many things in that instant. I could have said that 3 nights earlier I had stood with my team, counting our breaths in the dark while we waited for the gate at the compound to open. I could have said we knew their routines by heart because I had taught myself every contour of their lives until the knowledge sat under my skin like bone. I could have said I had felt the thud of the door as it gave and the rush of air past my ears and the quick flash of a man's eyes when he realized the story he thought he was in had ended. I could have told him about the woman we found in a locked room with wrists worn raw from the ropes, how she could not speak at first and then could not stop. I could have told him about the ledger hidden under a floorboard, the books that would bring down a network that had hollowed out neighborhoods like rot. Instead I said, "You said I dropped out of college." "Well," he said, and now the microphone seemed unsure whom it served. "You left after the first year." "I left to train," I said. "I left because I was recruited. I left because I was needed." A glass clinked somewhere. A breath caught so loud it sounded like a gasp. I felt none of it inside my body. Inside, there was only the steady river of purpose I had followed for 2 decades. "You said I work security," I continued. "That is not accurate." I could feel my brother's eyes on me now, wide and brimming with a childhood's worth of questions he had never asked. Once, when we were young, we had built forts out of couch cushions and pretended we were explorers mapping a city no one had ever seen. He had gotten bored and left me under the blankets with a flashlight, tracing roads to nowhere while our mother called us to dinner. A week later, he told our father that I had made him stay too long in that dark, that I had ruined the game. That was when I learned that some people do not like the inside of a map unless they made it themselves. "Caroline," my father said again. There was less command in it now, more plea. "This is not the time." Behind him, the cake rose in white tears, guarded by a small army of sugared flowers. I thought of the times he had told me there was a correct moment for each truth and how, when the moment came, he had found a reason to delay it. It was the time. For 24 years, I said. I have served in federal law enforcement. I lead operations focused on dismantling international drug networks. I have done the work you tell your friends you wish more people would do. I have done it quietly, because it mattered that the work be done more than it mattered that I be thanked. A rush went through the crowd as if someone had opened a window and cold air had poured in. At a front table, a man in a gray suit lowered his phone and whispered my name like a discovery. A woman beside him pulled the news page closer to her face, then lifted her eyes to me and blinked, not quite believing that the photograph on her screen and the woman in the black dress were one and the same. My father's hand tightened around his glass until his knuckles blanched. He was good at performance. He understood what an audience required and how to give it to them. Standing there, he understood something else too. He understood that this audience was slipping from him like sand. I remembered the first time he took me to his office when I was small enough to be dazzled by everything. He sat me in his chair and told me it was not a throne but it might as well be. He showed me the plaques on the wall, the framed certificates that said he had done things well. When I asked him what mattered most in his work, he said, without hesitation, respect. Respect from clients, respect from the men in his industry, respect from the community. I nodded like I understood because children are eager to agree with the people they want to love. Later, when I was alone on a stakeout at 2 in the morning on a street where dogs barked at the same shadows I watched, I thought about that word. Respect. I decided then that the only kind worth chasing was the kind you could hold in your hands without it cutting you. The kind that came from the quiet assurance that you had done your job when no one would ever know your name. The ballroom did not know my name yet. It was learning. Aunt Delia rose halfway from her chair and then sat again, as if her own body had startled her. Mrs. Prentice pressed her lips together and stared at the tablecloth like it might offer her a new script. Mr. Wallace crossed himself out of habit and looked embarrassed to have done so. You do not have to be like this, my father said. He was trying to sound reasonable, the way people do when they want to close a door without admitting they had slammed it earlier. We are celebrating. We are, I said. And I am trying to celebrate honestly. I could see the exact second the headline crossed enough screens to reach critical mass. It happened near the bar, where a cluster of cousins had been trading stories and photographs. One of them sucked in breath hard enough to make the others look. Then all at once the sound moved across the room, a wave of disbelief that found its voice in fragments. That is her name. No, look, the same face. Says she led it. Says she is in charge. The word charge hummed behind my ribs. I had spent years taking responsibility for rooms where the stakes were measured in bullets or lives. The room I stood in now was paper by comparison, and yet the weight of it pressed on me in a way that had little to do with danger and everything to do with history. I looked at David. He had always been good at crowds. He could soften a hard moment with a joke, grease a stuck door with a smile. Now he looked at me like a man who had opened his front door expecting a neighbor and found a flood. You should have told us, he said. He meant it kindly. The kindness undid me a little. You should have asked, I said, and I kept my voice as gentle as I could manage while the floor shifted under us. A waiter, pale and intent on being invisible, reached for my father's empty glass. The rim tapped the table. Crystal against wood, a small bright sound that felt like precision. My father tried once more. He lifted his chin, hunting for the angle that would return control to his hands. Caroline, this is not necessary. You can do whatever it is you do and we can still have a nice night, can we not? Nice night. The words felt like a rug he wanted to pull back over the stain. But the stain was already there, dark and unignorable. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. You said I was not what a father dreams for his little girl, I said. You said it in front of a room full of people who have known me my whole life. I let the truth sit between us like a third presence. I am telling you I became what I dreamed when I was not anyone's little girl. I became someone I could live with. The hush that followed was not a lack of sound so much as a fullness, held for a heartbeat. The doors at the back of the ballroom swung. A gust of hallway air slipped in. I smelled rain that had not yet fallen. The television in the lobby must have been louder now, or maybe the quiet made it carry farther. The anchor's voice reached us in pieces, then clear. Special Agent in Charge Caroline Drake. The words threaded themselves through the room as if the air had learned my name and wanted to return it to me. My father's hand loosened. The glass left his fingers. It wobbled, tipped, and fell. It did not shatter. It struck the carpeted edge of the dance floor and rolled, mild and ridiculous, until it came to rest against the toe of my shoe. Bent, picked it up. I placed it upright on the table with the care you give something you do not plan to touch again. When I straightened, the crowd had changed in that minute way crowds do when they finally see what has been in front of them the whole time. A new recognition had joined the flowers and the chandeliers and the glittering utensils. Shimmered like heat. I let the moment breathe. I owed myself that much. For years I had let other people fill the quiet after my sentences with their explanations. Not tonight. The microphone sat on the head table, small and black, a device too simple to carry what had to be carried. I reached for it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, and the room obeyed the old ritual, the one where you return your eyes to the person who will decide what happens next. "My name is Caroline Drake." I could have said it all then. I could have said every line the news was feeding them, every title, every fact. I could have spoken the numbers, the awards, the meetings that would follow. I could have said the name of the operation that had kept me awake for months, and the number of days since I had last slept on a bed that did not move under me. I could have said the country's top lawyer would ask for my report, and that a meeting at a house painted white would likely follow. Those were true things. Instead, I looked at my father. I let him see me, not in the way photographs show you skin and hair and posture, but in the way a long corridor shows you its vanishing point if you stand in the exact right place. I let him see the distance between the story he told and the life I lived. "I am going to keep this brief," I said. The bow on the bride's dress rustled as she shifted. The quartet's cellist tightened a string with a tiny, betraying click. Somewhere a child laughed, then swallowed the sound as if reminded it was not allowed. I held the microphone a little closer. The breath that left me tasted like the ocean I ran beside most mornings when I was home. Salt and wind and the promise of another mile. "I will tell you what I can," I said, and I watched my father's mouth open, close, open again, like a man on the shore watching a wave he cannot name. I drew one more breath. The room drew it with me. Then I began. The first words left my mouth like I had been holding them for decades, each syllable heavy with everything I had swallowed before. The ballroom had gone still in that way only tension can create, where even the air feels suspended, waiting for the next move. "I am not a security guard," I said, and the simple truth was enough to send a faint ripple through the guests. "I am the special agent in charge for South American operations with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I have been in service for 24 years. A low murmur broke out near the far tables, the kind that spreads like fire from person to person. Heads began to turn, scanning the room for someone else to confirm what they were hearing. Some of them were already looking at their phones, lips parting as they matched the face in front of them with the one in the news photos. My father's eyes narrowed, but not with anger, more like someone who had been handed a puzzle he never expected to see completed. "3 nights ago," I continued, "I led the operation that dismantled the Valdez cartel, one of the largest drug trafficking networks in the world. We seized over $2 billion in narcotics and assets. We arrested their leadership. They will not rebuild." The room had turned entirely toward me now. The bride and groom sat motionless, their fingers still locked together, though I noticed David's grip had tightened enough to turn his knuckles pale. I let the silence breathe for a moment, not rushing to fill it. In my work, I had learned that the pause can be just as sharp a weapon as any word. "You've spent years thinking I was nothing more than a girl who couldn't finish school," I said, glancing toward my father without softening the edge in my tone. "You've told friends, family, and strangers that I took the easy route, that my work didn't matter. All while I have spent my life going after people who would have destroyed entire communities if left unchecked." Someone near the bar whispered, "She's on the news right now." A small chorus of gasps followed, the sound of people scrolling, seeing my name next to headlines they never imagined belonged to me. I caught sight of my Aunt Susan in the corner. Her lips pressed together in the same thin line she always wore when I did something she disapproved of. She looked like she wanted to sink into her chair, as if association alone could burn her. "I've been shot at, chased and hunted," I said. "I've infiltrated organizations that kill without hesitation. I've walked into rooms where everyone inside wanted me dead. And I did it because someone had to. Because those are the choices that keep poison off the streets and away from your children." My voice did not rise, but each word landed like a weight placed carefully on a scale, one after the other. "You wanted to talk about success," I said, turning my gaze fully on my father. "You said it's about making the right choices. Well, I made mine. I chose to serve my country. I chose to put my life on the line for people who will never know my name. I chose to fight battles you couldn't even imagine, and I won them." A deep quiet followed. Even the servers, who had been moving quietly between tables, had stopped mid-step. I took in the sight of my father now. His mouth slightly open. His face drained of the confidence that had filled it minutes earlier. His hand rested on the edge of the table as though he needed the anchor. "I never told you what I really did," I said, "because I wanted you to be proud of me for who I was, not for what I could list on a resume. But you never asked. Not once. You decided what I was, and you stuck to it, no matter how wrong you were." David's voice broke the silence. "Caroline, we had no idea." I didn't look at him when I answered. "You didn't have an idea because you didn't care to have one." The words were blunt, but they were the truth. I glanced toward the back of the room where more guests were now openly holding their phones up, some filming, others still scrolling through the headlines. I saw my own face there, my agency headshot, and the bold text beneath it. "Special Agent in Charge Caroline Drake leads record-breaking cartel takedown." "Tomorrow morning," I continued, "I fly to Washington to brief the Attorney General on this operation. Next month, I testify before Congress on cartel infiltration in American cities. The President knows my name." That was when my father's hand jerked slightly, the crystal flute tipping just enough that a thin stream of champagne spilled onto the tablecloth. I let my voice soften then, not with forgiveness, but with the finality of someone stating a fact. "But none of that is the real success. The real success is that I can sleep at night knowing I made a difference. That I saved lives. That I've taken killers off the street and drugs out of schools. That I've done something that mattered." I let my eyes travel over the room. Faces I had known since childhood, neighbors, relatives, my father's old friends. Many of them couldn't look at me now. Not out of shame for me, but shame for themselves. I set the microphone down gently on the table, the sound of it clicking against the wood oddly loud in the stillness. Then I looked at my brother. "Congratulations on your wedding, David. I hope you'll be very happy together." I turned and began walking toward the doors. The ballroom stayed silent except for the sound of my heels striking marble. I was halfway to the exit when I heard my father's voice, small and stripped of its usual command. "Caroline, wait." I paused but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said, and it was the first time in my life I believed he meant it. "I know," I replied, and I walked out into the night. In the parking lot, the cool air hit my face like a clean break. I unlocked my car and checked my phone. 17 missed calls from reporters. 43 messages from colleagues congratulating me. And one from Director Alvarez. "The President wants to meet with you Monday morning. Hope you enjoyed the wedding." For the first time that day I smiled. Then I drove away from the ballroom, from the chandeliers, from the applause meant for someone else, and back toward the life I had built for myself. Brick by brick, choice by choice, far from the shadow of anyone's expectations. If you want, I can now move into Chapter 3 and keep building the curiosity before the climax, diving into Caroline's next challenge after the wedding confrontation, and weaving in flashbacks to the operation itself. "Do you want me to continue straight into Chapter 3? You said. Continue." ChatGPT said. Chapter 3. The night before the raid. The rain was already falling when our plane touched down in Bogota, a fine mist that clung to the windows and made the city lights shimmer like they were underwater. The clock on my watch read 2:17, but my body had long since stopped recognizing hours in the traditional sense. In operations like this, time became a sequence of tasks, not numbers. The hum of the engines faded as we taxied to the small, unmarked hangar reserved for our unit. Inside, waiting under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, was the final team. 7 men and 3 women, each carrying the weight of months of preparation in the lines of their faces. "Drake," called Ramos, one of my best field coordinators, his voice cutting through the clatter of gear being unloaded. "Intel confirmed. Target Alpha is still in the compound. No movement in 48 hours. Looks like he's dug in." But dug in meant predictable. Predictable meant vulnerable. "We move in 20 hours, I said. Long enough for final checks, not long enough for nerves to fester. The compound we were about to breach wasn't just any cartel headquarters. It was the beating heart of the Valdez Empire, a fortress of concrete and steel built deep in the jungle, accessible only by a winding road and guarded by men who would rather die than surrender. As I walked the length of the hangar, my eyes scanned each member of the team. I had handpicked them, agents who could be trusted to follow an order without hesitation, who wouldn't flinch at the snap of gunfire or the sudden chaos of close-quarters combat. Alvarez had been clear. This was my operation. Success or failure, the responsibility was mine. In the corner of the hangar, I spread the satellite imagery across a folding table. Roads, patrol routes, guard towers, all marked in red. The heat signatures from last night's flyover confirmed what we had suspected. Valdez's lieutenants were inside, along with his personal accountant, the man who kept the ledgers that proved every shipment, every bribe, every killing. "The moment we secure those ledgers, this whole organization collapses," I told the team. "Without them, Valdez's network can deny, delay, hide. With them, we own the truth." Silence followed, not out of doubt, but out of the understanding that truth in this business came at a price, often in blood. Hours blurred into one another as we checked and rechecked our equipment. Rifles cleaned, body armor fitted, comms tested until the static cleared. At 1942, we gathered in the briefing room. The rain had picked up, drumming against the tin roof in a steady, relentless rhythm. I stood at the front, the maps behind me, my voice steady. "Once we land, we move fast. Team 1 breaches the north wall. Team 2 takes the west gate. My unit enters through the service corridor on the east side. No warning shots, no wasted movement. We take control in under 4 minutes." Ramos grinned faintly, the kind of smile you see in people who know exactly how dangerous a thing is and choose to do it anyway. I went on. "Valdez is priority 1. Countant is priority 2. Intel suggests they're both in the main residence. Expect armed resistance at every choke point. No civilian presence confirmed, but stay sharp. The jungle hides more than you think." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Alvarez again. "Weather holding for exfil. Good hunting." By 23:05, we were strapped into the Black Hawk, blades whipping the rain into mist. The roar was deafening, but it was familiar, a sound I had learned to fold into the rhythm of my own heartbeat. As we lifted off, Bogotá's lights vanished beneath the clouds, replaced by the dense, unbroken dark of the jungle. In moments like that, there's no space for doubt. There's only the plan, the team, and the target. I looked around at the faces beside me. Hard eyes, steady hands, minds tuned to the razor edge of the coming hours. I had led them into fire before. I would do it again. But this time felt different. Heavier. Final. Because this was the raid that would either make my career, or end it entirely. The jungle at night is a living thing. Every sound feels amplified. The hiss of insects, the rustle of unseen creatures, the distant rush of water somewhere beyond the trees. But under the thunder of the Black Hawk's rotors, the jungle's voice was reduced to a whisper. We were less than 5 minutes out when the pilot's voice cut through the comms. "Approaching drop zone. 30 seconds. The red interior light painted our faces in sharp relief. Across from me, Ramos tightened the strap on his vest. His eyes locked on mine for the briefest second before flicking back to the open bay door. Each of us was already running the plan in our heads, every movement memorized, every step drilled until it was instinct. 15 seconds, the pilot called. The black mass of the compound rose ahead, a darker shape against the jungle canopy. From above, it looked inert, just another slab of concrete in the middle of nowhere. But I knew what waited inside. Armed guards, steel gates, reinforced doors. And 2 men whose capture would dismantle an empire. The light over the door switched from red to green. "Go!" I ordered. Boots hit the ground hard. The smell of wet earth and fuel filled my lungs. The chopper lifted away instantly, its downdraft rattling the leaves before fading into the distance. My unit moved toward the eastern wall, keeping low, weapons raised. The night vision lenses bathed everything in ghostly green. Team 1's voice crackled in my earpiece. "North wall breached." Seconds later, Team 2. "West gate down." "East team moving," I whispered. The service corridor door was exactly where Intel had placed it. Steel, reinforced, padlocked. Ramos stepped forward, setting the charges with calm precision. I counted under my breath. 3, 1. The door blew inward with a muted concussive thump, and we were inside. The corridor smelled of oil and mildew, lit only by the stuttering glow of a single overhead bulb. We moved fast, each footstep deliberate. The first guard rounded the corner, rifle half-raised, too slow. 2 shots. He went down without a sound. "Clear," Ramos murmured. We pressed forward, turning into a wider hallway. Muffled voices echoed from ahead. Spanish, sharp and tense. I raised my fist, signaling the team to halt. Through the half-open door at the end of the hall, I could see them. 2 armed men standing near a table stacked with crates. One of them reached for a radio. I stepped into the doorway and fired. Both dropped before the first crate hit the floor. "Accountant is 2 rooms over," came Team 1's voice in my ear. Valdez moving toward main hall. "Cut him off," I said. "Do not let him get to the vehicles." The air felt heavier now, charged with the knowledge that our window was closing. Once Valdez realized we were inside, his only objective would be escape. We reached the main intersection of the compound, 3 hallways converging into one wide corridor that led to the residence. Gunfire erupted from the left. Team 2's position. "They've got eyes on Valdez," someone shouted over comms. I sprinted forward, my team behind me. As we rounded the corner, a burst of automatic fire chewed into the wall inches from my head. Shards of plaster rained down. I dropped to one knee, aimed and fired. The shooter crumpled. Ahead, Valdez appeared, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark shirt. His face lit for a split second by the muzzle flash of his own weapon before he ducked back into the residence. "He's inside," I called. "Push!" We surged through the doorway, the heavy scent of cigar smoke and cologne clinging to the air. The room beyond was opulent. Marble floors, polished wood, and a chandelier that swung slightly from the vibrations of our breach. Valdez was at the far end, fumbling with a side door. I moved forward, fast but measured, keeping him in my sights. "Federal agents!" I shouted. "Drop it!" For a heartbeat he froze. Then he bolted. Ramos lunged forward, tackling him just short of the door. The 2 hit the floor hard. "Target secure," Ramos grunted into comms. In the same moment, a cry came from the other side of the room. "We've got the accountant." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. "Package 1 and 2 in custody," I said into my mic. "Begin extraction." But even as I said it, a thought pressed into the back of my mind. This was too clean. Too easy. And in my line of work, too easy always meant something was coming. We had Valdez on his knees, wrists bound, head down. The accountant was cuffed too, already mumbling in rapid Spanish about deals gone wrong and people who would kill him for talking. The compound should have felt like ours now. But it didn't. There was a vibration under my boots. Subtle at first, almost like the hum of machinery deep in the walls. I caught Ramos's eye. He felt it too. "Hold position," I said into the comms, my voice low but sharp. "Don't rush the exfil yet." The others froze, eyes scanning. And then I heard it. Faint but growing louder. The sound of metal grinding against metal. "Shut up," I snapped at the accountant, who was still rambling. "Listen." It came from the western side of the residence, beyond the double doors that led to the garage. Team 2's leader came over comms. "Drake, we've got movement. Multiple heat signatures approaching from the south perimeter. They weren't here 5 minutes ago." "Reinforcements. How many?" "A dozen at least. Heavily armed." My mind calculated the map. South perimeter meant they'd cut off the main road. The garage meant vehicles ready for escape or counterattack. I turned to Ramos. "Lock these two down. No one moves without my order." We swept toward the garage doors, boots pounding on the marble, every muscle coiled. The grinding sound was louder now. Something big was moving. I signaled for the breacher. He swung the door open. There, under the harsh overhead lights, was the escape plan. 2 armored trucks with their engines already running. Around them, 4 men in tactical gear, faces hidden, weapons raised the moment they saw us. The first shots rang out before anyone spoke. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a metallic roar that made the air vibrate. I dropped behind a concrete pillar, returning fire in controlled bursts. One of the men went down. The others fanned out, trying to flank us. "They're buying time for the convoy outside," I shouted. "Take the trucks out now." Ramos lobbed a flashbang. The detonation filled the garage with blinding light and a sound like the sky tearing open. We moved fast in the confusion, firing at the engines. Metal shrieked as rounds punched through radiators and blocks. Steam billowed into the air, filling the space with a hot, choking fog. But in the haze, one of the masked men slipped through the side door. I chased, instincts overriding thought. The corridor beyond was narrow, the walls sweating with damp. He was fast, but I was faster. When I caught him, I slammed him against the wall, ripping the mask away. The face that stared back at me made my blood run cold. It wasn't one of Valdez's men. It was a uniform I knew, a corrupted federal contact we had suspected for months but could never pin. He had access to intel on our raid. And if he was here, then someone had been feeding the cartel our movements. He sneered, even cuffed. "You think you've won tonight?" Outside, I could hear the distant pop of gunfire as our perimeter teams engaged the incoming reinforcements. My stomach sank. This was no victory lap. This was the opening move of something bigger. Keyed my comms. "All teams, listen up. This isn't over." They knew we were coming. And somewhere in the compound, I had the sick feeling there was still one more piece of this trap waiting to spring. The moment I said they knew we were coming, the air changed. The chatter on comms sharpened, voices tight. Every team suddenly aware that what we thought was the end of the fight was only the middle. "Ramos," I called. "Where's Valdez?" "Secure in the main room, 2 guards on him," he replied. "Double it. If they knew our plan, they'll go for him or the accountant before we can get them out." I moved quickly back toward the residence, my boots leaving wet streaks on the marble. My head was running over the compound layout we'd studied for months. Every corridor, every storage room, every blind spot. And yet, there was one sound I couldn't place. It was faint at first, like a whisper under the constant drone of the rain outside. A rhythmic metallic pulse. Not machinery exactly. More deliberate. Stop. The sound was coming from the far end of the hallway that led past the kitchen. We'd swept it earlier and found nothing but a pantry and a maintenance closet. I signaled 2 agents to follow and moved toward it. The closer we got, the more the sound resolved into something mechanical but hidden, like gears turning behind a wall. The pantry was small, stacked with sacks of rice and dried beans, crates of bottled water. I stepped inside, eyes sweeping the space, listening for where the sound was loudest. Back corner. I knelt, shoving a crate aside, revealing a section of wood paneling that didn't match the rest. "Breacher," I called. One sharp strike with a pry bar, and the panel gave way, revealing a narrow steel door no bigger than a crawl space hatch. The sound grew louder when I pressed my ear to it, an electric hum, steady and alive. I tried the handle. Get it open, I said. Seconds later, the lock was gone and I pulled the door wide. A dark tunnel stretched ahead, lit every 20 feet by bare bulbs strung along the ceiling. The air that came out was cool and dry, nothing like the damp jungle air that filled the rest of the compound. We moved single file, weapons up, the tunnel curving slightly before widening into a hidden chamber. And what was inside stopped me cold. Rows of servers humming softly, their blinking lights casting a faint glow across the concrete walls. Stacks of hard drives sat on metal shelves, each labeled in neat handwriting. One of my agents whistled low. This isn't just a drug operation. This is data. I stepped closer, reading the labels. They weren't inventory logs. They were names, hundreds of them, each with cities, dates, and coded annotations. Cartel clients, distributors, political contacts, judges, and not just in Colombia, Miami, Chicago, New York, Washington. My gut tightened. This is their insurance policy. Their leverage. Whoever controlled this information could dismantle careers, flip elections, control law enforcement. And if they knew we were coming, then someone on the inside wasn't just protecting the cartel's drug routes. They were protecting this. Secure every drive, I ordered. Bag and tag them. If this leaves with anyone but us, the operation's meaningless. But as we began loading the first evidence bags, my comms crackled with Ramos's voice, tense and clipped. Drake, we've got a problem. Valdez is gone. The chamber seemed to shrink around me. Repeat that, I said. He's gone. Both guards are down. Someone pulled him less than a minute ago. And then it hit me, this tunnel didn't just hide the servers. Had to connect somewhere else. Valdez hadn't escaped into the jungle. He was still here. And now, I was standing in the one place he couldn't afford to let me walk out of alive. The servers hummed like they were breathing, low and steady, masking any faint sound from beyond the chamber. I stepped back toward the tunnel entrance, eyes scanning the floor. Mud. Fresh boot prints, still wet from the rain outside, trailing deeper into the shadows at the far wall. 2 on the evidence, I ordered, pointing to the shelves. The rest with me. Weapons up. The prints led to another steel door I hadn't seen before, flush with the wall and painted the same dull gray as the concrete. It was slightly ajar, and from the other side came the faint scrape of boots on stone, moving fast. I shoved the door wide and stepped through. This tunnel was narrower, rougher, hacked out of the earth itself. The air smelled of wet soil and rust. Bare bulbs dangled from exposed wires, some swinging faintly like someone had brushed against them. I signaled for silence, and we advanced. Somewhere ahead, a voice barked in Spanish, urgent and low. Vamos rápido. Hurry. Valdez. The sound sharpened my focus. I'd studied that voice for months, replayed recordings until I could hear the arrogance behind every word. But now there was no arrogance, only fear. We reached a fork. The print split. 2 sets to the left, 1 to the right. Ramos caught my eye. He nodded. I take right. You take left. Cut them off. He peeled away with 2 agents. I kept forward with my unit, the tunnel bending sharply before opening into a larger space. And there he was. Valdez, halfway through a metal grate leading upward, one leg still dangling. Behind him, a man in dark fatigues pushed him from below. The man turned his head at the sound of our boots, and my stomach went tight. Agent Lewis. One of ours. Someone I'd worked with for years. His face twisted in recognition, but not surprise. Drop him, Lewis, I said. He smiled, cold, measured. You don't understand, Drake. This is bigger than you. Bigger than all of us. Bigger than the oath you swore. I stepped closer, rifle steady on his chest. Bigger than every agent who's bled for this job. Bigger than dying for nothing, he said. Then he shoved Valdez upward through the grate. Fired. Lewis jerked backward, the shot catching his shoulder, spinning him into the tunnel wall. His weapon clattered to the floor. I sprinted forward, grabbing the edge of the grate, hauling myself up after Valdez. The space above was a service shed. Small, wooden, the air thick with the scent of gasoline. Its single door hung open to the black jungle beyond. I burst through it, scanning for movement. Nothing but rain and the shimmer of leaves under moonlight. But in the mud outside the shed, fresh tracks led downslope toward the river. "Drake!" Ramos's voice crackled over comms, breathless. "We've got 3 runners heading toward your position. 2 are armed, one's Valdez." I started down the slope, the mud slick under my boots, my weapon up. The river's roar grew louder with every step, and through the sheets of rain, I caught sight of him, Valdez, scrambling into a narrow boat already roaring to life. The motor sputtered once, coughed, then caught. I was still 30 yards away. And for the first time that night, I wondered if this was how the operation would end. Our target slipping into the dark, the proof in that tunnel reduced to nothing but a ghost story. The boat's motor roared, spraying a fan of water as Valdez leaned forward, shouting at the driver to go faster. Rain streaked down my face, blurring my vision, but I didn't stop moving. Each step down the slick slope was a gamble. One wrong foothold and I'd be tumbling into the mud instead of closing the distance. I switched my rifle to my left shoulder, my right hand pulling the comms to my mouth. "Valdez is in a boat heading north on the river. I need cutoff points now." Ramos's voice came back, tense. "Team 2 is moving to intercept at the Narrows. You've got 3 minutes, maybe less, before they're out of range." 3 minutes wasn't enough. Not in this rain, not on this terrain. I hit the riverbank, water surging around my boots. The current was fast, swollen from the storm, churning brown and violent. Ahead, the boat's red stern light bobbed, already pulling away into the dark. To my left, tied to a half-submerged post, was a small skiff with an outboard motor. It looked ancient, the paint peeling, but the keys were still in the ignition. I didn't hesitate. The engine coughed twice before catching, spitting smoke into the wet air. The vibration of it traveled up through my arms as I pushed away from the bank, the skiff shuddering under the strain. The rain stung my face like grit, but I kept my eyes on that dim red light ahead. Valdez's boat weaved through the bends, hugging the inside curves where the current was calmer. They thought they could lose me in the darkness, that the river would cover their escape. I closed the gap slowly, the skiff's engine whining with the effort. Every time I gained a few yards, they'd surge ahead again, spraying water into the air like a warning. Then a flash lit the night, muzzle fire from the rear of their boat. The round slammed into the water a foot from my bow. I ducked, adjusting my angle, letting the skiff drift for a moment before cutting the throttle and coming up behind them at a different line. The next shot went wide. My hands were steady on the wheel. Timing was everything. The river narrowed ahead, funneling the water into a faster, more violent rush. The roar of it grew, drowning out the sound of their engine for a moment. This was my chance. I pushed the throttle to its limit, the skiff lurching forward, closing the last stretch. At 20 yards, I swung the rifle up one-handed, bracing against the console. One shot. The boat's engine screamed, then sputtered into silence. Valdez spun around in the darkness, shouting orders I couldn't hear over the rush of the current. Their driver tried to restart the motor, but the river had already taken control, spinning them sideways. I cut my own engine and let the current carry me in. We collided with a hollow thud, my skiff slamming into their port side. I jumped before they could react, boots hitting the slick deck. The driver lunged at me. I caught his arm, twisted, and sent him sprawling into the river. Valdez froze, his hands hovering just above his lap. "Don't," I said, my rifle trained on him. His eyes flicked to the shore, then back to me. "You can kill me," he said in English. "But the list, it's already gone." The words hit me like a second impact. The list. The drives from the hidden room. Before I could demand more, a voice crackled over my comms. Ramos again, but this time with panic in his tone. "Drake, we've been hit." The evidence is gone. The rain hammered harder, each drop striking like a drumbeat, counting down the seconds we had left. Valdez was on his knees now, his hands raised, the red stern light casting a faint glow over his face. He wasn't afraid, he was smiling. "You think this matters?" he said in Spanish, his voice almost drowned by the roar of the river. "You think putting me in a cage will change anything?" I kept my rifle steady on him. "You're done. Your people are done." He shook his head, the rain dripping from his hair. "My people have the real power now. They'll decide what happens to you." In my earpiece, Ramos's voice cut through the noise, urgent and jagged. "Drake, the server room's been hit. 2 of ours are down. The drives are gone." My grip tightened on the rifle. "Who took them?" "Masked. Moved like pros. They had our comms frequencies. They knew our signals." Inside, the cold certainty settled. This wasn't a scramble by cartel leftovers. This was a coordinated hit, timed perfectly to pull focus toward Valdez while the real prize walked out from under us. "Secure what's left and lock down the perimeter," I ordered. "Nobody in or out without my clearance." I yanked a zip tie from my vest, bound Valdez's wrists, and hauled him to his feet. He didn't resist. He walked with me to the skiff like a man being escorted to a party he'd been expecting all along. The ride back was against the current, every minute longer than the one before. The rain had eased, but the jungle felt heavier now, pressing in from all sides. When we reached the dock near the compound, Ramos was there, his face lit only by the dim glow of a headlamp. "2 of the guards on the tunnel entrance are dead," he said quietly. "Execution shots. Whoever did this knew exactly where to go. And the rest of the drives." He shook his head. "Gone. Every last one. The cases are still warm from where they were pulled." I glanced at Valdez, who stood between 2 agents, the faintest smirk still playing on his lips. "Who has them?" I asked. "Ask your people," he said. "Maybe one of them will tell you why they sold you out." I stepped closer. "Names, Valdez. Now." He just laughed low and steady like we were sharing some private joke. Inside the compound, the server room looked like a carcass picked clean, wires hanging loose, shelves stripped bare. The agents guarding the space avoided my eyes, the unspoken truth hanging between us. The breach had been from within. I stood in the doorway, water dripping from my jacket, and let the silence settle until even the hum of the remaining machines seemed too loud. "Everyone in this building is to be accounted for," I said finally. "And no one leaves. I don't care what badge they carry." Ramos glanced at me, his jaw tight. "That's going to ruffle feathers." "Good," I said. "I'm done pretending the rot isn't here." In the corner of the room, something caught my eye. A single drive, small and black, wedged between the wall and a fallen crate. I picked it up, turning it in my hand. No label. No markings. But it was warm. And for a second I thought maybe, just maybe, we hadn't lost everything. Then my comms crackled again, a new voice. Female, unfamiliar. "Agent Drake," it said, smooth and deliberate. "If you want that drive to mean anything, you'll meet me in 48 hours. Alone." 48 hours felt like 48 days. I spent the time cycling between the safe house in Bogota and the agency field office, replaying the voice over and over in my head. Smooth, deliberate, female but not familiar. Either she'd worked hard to hide her real cadence, or I'd simply never crossed her path before. The location she gave me was precise. An abandoned cargo terminal on the edge of the river, 2 hours outside the city. She didn't specify a time of day, only when the sun is lowest. In the jungle, that meant the golden hour before darkness swallowed everything. I told no one where I was going. The team assumed I was flying to headquarters. Ramos knew better but didn't press. He only said, "Watch your 6, before letting me walk out without a tail. I drove alone. The road turned from cracked pavement to mud, the jungle pressing close on both sides. My vehicle, a beat-up civilian jeep with mismatched panels, blended into the local traffic. What little there was. When I reached the terminal, The place was a skeleton of concrete and rusted steel. Vines crawled up the walls, and the roof sagged where rainwater had pooled for years. Inside, the light was dim, filtered through holes in the siding. The air smelled of mildew and salt from the nearby river. She was already there. A woman in dark tactical gear, hood down, hair slicked back. Her posture was military. Balanced weight, hands visible but close enough to reach a weapon if needed. And in her left hand was a slim, hard-shelled case. "Case. You came alone," she said, voice exactly as it had been on the comms. Measured, deliberate. "You have something that belongs to me," I replied. She tilted her head. "That depends on who you think you work for." I stepped closer, boots echoing on the cracked concrete. "I work for the people who put their lives in my hands when they can't fight for themselves. I work for the truth. And right now, the truth is in that case." Her eyes flicked toward the case, then back to me. "These drives contain names you don't want to see. People you think you can trust. People who sign your paychecks." "Try me," I said. She smiled faintly, like she'd been expecting that answer. "There are 3 copies in existence. This is one. Valdez had the second. The third. Well, let's just say it's somewhere safe for now. I'm giving you this one because you've earned the right to decide what happens to it." I didn't move. "What's the catch?" "The catch is that once you open it, you can't go back to who you were before. Every name, every connection. It will pull you into a war inside your own house." I thought of the faces in the compound, the agents who'd averted their eyes, the ones who'd moved too quickly or too slowly when the drives were taken. The rot was there. I felt it. Slowly I reached out and took the case. It was cold, heavier than I expected. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you're the only one they haven't bought yet," she said. And then, before I could respond, she stepped back into the shadows and was gone, swallowed by the dying light. I stood alone in the terminal, the case in my hands, the jungle outside humming with the approach of night. Somewhere behind me, the river moved on, carrying with it the weight of the raid, the arrests, the evidence lost and found. But in front of me was the choice that would define everything that came next. Not for the agency, not for the headlines, for me. I walked out into the humid air, the case locked under my arm, and started the engine. The road ahead was nothing but darkness. But I had never been afraid of the dark.